am the luckiest, most unlucky person you'll ever meet. So unlucky in that I killed my son and I'm, just whatever. But lucky that I was able to work with important people in Washington and get that bill passed. So now cameras are mandated in all the vehicles sold in America. And that saves a lot of lives.
Hey everyone. Everyone in healthcare has a story that they never forget. Some are beautiful, some are difficult, most are never told. This is the space and the place where folks in healthcare talk about the moments that changed them. Welcome to Humemed, where we talk about the emotional, moral, and human realities of medicine. I'm Dr. David Spiro. Thank you for being here. I have a very special guest today with us, Dr. Greg Gulbransen, who did his medical school at NYCOM and then his residency in pediatrics at Northwell Health Systems and has a private practice in Oyster Bay. He is an incredibly talented photographer and has had a very interesting life. And I just want to say it. You're my hero. What I've read and what I've seen is there's so many things that you do that are changing the care of the children that are in your practice, and also the way you approach life is inspiring. And I cannot wait to hear your story today.
Thanks for having me on. You do have some fascinating guests on this show, and I have enjoyed so much listening to so many people and their interesting stories. I just sometimes I just can't believe it. It's just really amazing. I just it's important that collectively we are a very powerful force. People taking care of people, physicians, and particularly when it comes to children, because we're so just crazy about it, and we are quite a powerful group of people. So it's nice to be a part of it. So I, I had that tragic accident back 23 years ago where I was moving the car in my driveway and accidentally backed over and killed my 2-year-old son, Cameron, with an SUV. And I was, he was in the house. The house is baby proof, the whole thing. And my wife was inside. And it's a long story. But anyway, just absolutely tragic. And, there, but for the grace of God, go I. And I was the one. So, as physician, when this stuff happens to us, and it does happen to a bunch of us, this kind of stuff, we're on the line and we have to make a decision. And these are brutal decisions. And it's either, you're going to turn to substances or quit or suicide, something. And like a lot of us, I basically decided to stand and deliver and really say, all right, this is a hard one. This is humbling, but I'm going to do this and I'm going to make a role model for my children. And that's the most important thing I could do. My son was 5 at the time. He was a survivor. And then ultimately we have Julia. And I said, I have to do this for them and for other children. So I am the luckiest, most unlucky person you'll ever meet. So unlucky in that I killed my son and I'm, just whatever. But lucky that I was able to work with important people in Washington and get that bill passed. So now cameras are mandated in all the vehicles sold in America. And that saves a lot of lives. And, I'm glad to be a part of that team that did that. So, that's what pediatricians and ER docs and trauma docs and surgeons, and this is what we do, right? So we put ourselves out there and we turn it around and try to make something good out of it. So that's what we did. And it was an incredible fight. But as that went on, I was always working very hard. And in fact, I just even worked hard on 28 days a month in the office and really building the practice up. And it was a big hit. But after a while, I decided, I got this medicine thing down to a good place, bought the office, bought the partners out. I'm feeling good about myself. I need to do something more. And I went into the creative space and I ended up doing photography, teaching myself photography. I did the wildlife thing, you go photograph birds, all the whole thing, by big lenses and whatever. It's just a thing you do. So I did the thing. And then I decided did fashion photography for Elle magazine and Marie Claire and Harper's in Europe. And I would do that on my afternoons off on Wednesdays in the city. So that was fun. Yeah, I wanted to learn Flash. I just kind of jumped right in there. You know how when we're residents, they say, sink or swim? Well, sink or swim, right? It was my first night on call when I was a second-year resident. A kid coded in one of these inner city hospitals. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was having oatmeal, and it said, pediatric code, and I was like, "Oh, shit." And back then, you didn't have you had the card, like the little code card.
Yeah.
And you do everything, so that's how I learned photography, sink or swim. So I ended up realizing after a while that I'm a people person, and I wanted to do the same thing with the camera, and I like telling stories. So I was in the doing different things, and my wife said, "Why do you have to travel so far to take pictures? You going to Alaska to do polar bears?" I said, "All right." So I went back to where I studied psychiatry, and that was in the Bronx. And I have this certain attraction to the Bronx. And I hit it off with a group of kids riding bicycles. And this is the younger version of you see these guys riding these big bands of quads and dirt bikes around. You see this stuff. And there were these little kids riding around, and they were between 9 and maybe 18 or so. And there was a father there, cool guy. I talk to him all the time. I talked to him today. And he said, "My goal is to keep these kids out of trouble. And, bikes up, guns down. We got a little bike gang." And I befriended them, bought them winter gear, went in and photographed them, and I was trying to learn. I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to learn documentary photography. I said, "This is a cool story." So a couple of years with them, it went on, and I realized they really are trying to stay out of trouble with guns because there's a lot of guns around here. And I made a little book called Ride Out, and it's kind of a cool photo book, and I gave it away. And ultimately, I said, there's something going on with these guns. And I decided, I think I'm going to photograph people in the same community who've been shot. Sure enough, one of the bicycle riders was shot, and his name is Malik. And he was shot in the thoracic spine, paralyzed from about here down. So I went over there and I started to tell his story. And his mom, rough and tough lady, 5 men in that house have all been shot and survived, all wounded. She calls them her warriors in this apartment in the projects. And I said, I think there's a story here. You think I could work with you? And she said, sure. So I would bring over some groceries and some food, and, because they were letting me into their life. And I was bringing them prints of the pictures that I took. And the next thing you know, I had this collection of images of what it's like to be one of the local leaders of the Crips. And I really got in there, and I got exposed to stuff that I never thought I'd be exposed to.
And the Crips, just for our audience, we do have an international audience, but the Crips are gangs, correct? Or is the name of a gang?
Right. So the Crips are a big gang in America, East Coast, West Coast, and then there's different subsets. There's different sets, and there's a particular set on the street. So I ended up making this book. It's called "Say Less and Won an Award," photo book of the year.
I
And
have it.
yeah, it's a moving story. And the person who interviewed us there is the editor of Life magazine, Bill Spiro. So it's basically my relationship with Malik and our trauma that we both went through. And he's the local leader. He was shot in the spine. The members of the gang would come each day and strip him down, put him in the shower, and just, everyone's going to jail and who killed who. It was, I mean, it was nasty. I was trying to figure out what's actually going on. We know gun violence is a public health crisis. And as physicians, we're trying to work on this. But what are they? What's going on with these guns? Do these people have families? Do they have children? Do they worship? What? So I went in and I saw what fascinates me. They're petrified, and it's an offense defense thing, and they're constantly afraid of being shot. And they live in such a traumatic, hard environment that we'll never understand what it's like. And it's really scary. I have a completely different take on things. And, Malik and he tells me all the time, "Greg, I love you. I'm out of catheters. The government gives him catheters. Sometimes he runs out. Great. Can you get me some catheters?" So I run a surgical supply store, run in there and take care of him. And to this day, we're still very, we're close friends. Christmas Day, I'll go over there and do some stuff with him and help the family out quite a bit as much as I can, along with the rest of the people in the community. Because to this day, several other members have been shot and killed. And that is a big blow to the community when somebody is killed. The reverberations just shoot out. Everybody gets affected by it, and it's really hard on them. So try to go in there and work with them, make it a little bit easier. So when that story was done in the same neighborhood, I ended up seeing just serendipitously, I fell in love with some of these fentanyl addicts who are such, interesting people who also have interesting stories. And they're in the same buildings on the rooftops, living in the little square rooms up top at the water towers. Those are elevator rooms. And they break into them and they live in there. And they all have very interesting stories and how they work together and they hate each other and they steal from each other and beat each other up, but they rescue each other when they're sick, dope sick. And then they'll dye each other's hair, but then they'll fight with each other. It's incredible how this little network works. But the amount of pain that they all have interesting stories. They were molested, they were raped, they were beat, they were this, and they say, I'm just trying to hide the pain, with this drug. And then they get addicted. And every single one of them has said to me, they pulled me aside. I'm doing this for years now. They pulled me aside and say, Greg, can you take me to rehab? So I'm in rehab all the time. Yeah, sure, let's go. But I take care of them. I feed them, particularly Sunday mornings before work. I have office hours I want to be there at 8:30. So I'm in the Bronx at 6 o'clock. I'll run about 4:30 in the morning, drive in, take care of these guys, feed them. We just had some super cold weather, as you know, sleeping bags, clothes, stuff like that, and really help them out. But I've learned completely different things about what's going on. And it's been an honor to be in their community, documenting them with the camera. I have what will be an incredible story worth telling, and it has a lot of beautiful photographs. So I'm looking forward to those two big stories. I'm doing something also in West Virginia on poverty in America with a young mom raising 4 children in Appalachia, but that's another story for another time.
Yeah, I read about that one. The audience should know that there was an incredibly wonderful article that was published this past July in the New Yorker about Dr. Greg and the great work he's doing. I had a question just to start from the beginning. When you were in residency in pediatrics, would you have ever imagined yourself doing the work that you're doing, going into the projects and supporting people who've been shot and who have addiction
Ab-
issues?
Absolutely not, no clue, no clue
You
at
had
all.
no interest in that. Like it was not even a thought in your mind that that's something that you had an interest in during your training.
It didn't interest me at all. If anything, it would have scared me. I said, something probably wrong with you. I think it didn't. But after time and maturation, a lot of things happen to us as physicians. And there's something that I came up with. And I'm sure you have your own term, your own expression too. But, I say that when you first come out of residency and you become a physician or whatever, in whatever role you are, we all work so hard, you need the patients, right? You need them. You got it. Particularly if you're building a private practice, you need the patients. You need the patients. And about a dozen years later, a therapist sits down with you and says, you don't get this right, pal. The patients need you. Calm down. You're like, whoa, you have this epiphany. And then if you're mature enough, which seems like everyone that I've heard on your podcast is certainly mature enough, you get about 20 something years into it. You say, now we all need each other because that's the way it is. We all need each other. And then when you're with the camera, you see the same thing, but you're physically a little bit closer and you're really, something about art that makes it a little different. And you're spending more time because you're with them, you carry them a lot. So, um, yeah, I never thought I would be doing it, but I certainly am doing it now. And it's what I do a lot, despite the fact that I work so many hours.
Well, I grew up on Long Island. I grew up on the South Shore, and when I was growing up I'm 60, so I was growing up in the 70s and early 80s when I developed awareness. I remember going into the city with my grandparents and them pointing homeless people out and saying very negative things about homeless people. So I had this image of what homeless people were. And then I went to medical school at UCSF, and I worked at San Francisco General Hospital, public service area. And my patients were homeless, and they were nice, and they were interesting, and they had interesting lives, and they were human beings. And they actually had stories to tell, and they had experiences in their life that were beyond traumatic. And there's a sense of what I've experienced in my own world, because I've been working in mostly urban pediatric ERs. And it's very hard as a white male physician to get a sense of what it's like to be black and be a mom who's black and have a fear that your child is going to get shot. And white people generally don't think about that. Would you say
Right.
that's a fair assessment?
100% true. The amount of trauma that these people live with, gun people particularly, is incredible. When they go outside, where they go, where they sit, who they're talking to, the social media is a big deal. Who's knocking off who's talking about who, and whose rap song, it's complete. The amount of stress that they have and the extremely poor healthcare. If we have stress, we're going to get cognitive behavioral therapy, go on an SSRI, something like that. It's not happening. It's really, 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 it's just so sad. I have a completely different take. And being a white person in that community, you have to be look, you don't have to respect everybody. Not everybody deserves your respect, but you need to show respect and you need to understand. So you need to be very understanding. And I always knew my role, and I always respect the fact that I'm an outsider. And as much as I try and as much as I'm kind and nice and very thorough, when somebody gets killed, I'm over to the family. Somebody passes away that we kind of know in the neighborhood, I knock on the door. Let's go. Come on, get outside. Let's do a family portrait. Come on, let's go. On me. Oh, really? People love a good photograph of themselves. And this community is completely neglected. They have the world's worst pictures of themselves on their phones. They know. Come on, let's go. And I'll set up a studio right in the street. The police never bother me because you're not allowed to set up a studio, but they're like, oh, just, keep it safe. And you just take beautiful portraits, and I can do that, and I'll pay for the retouching and the prints and the whole thing. And, it's just they feel important. They feel good about themselves, and they look good, and they appreciate that a lot. So that's really my tool to get in there, along with providing healthcare, because sometimes we'll say, this one's sick, that one's sick, and you take a look. What do you think about this? How about my inhalers? What do I do? Symbicort, what does it do? That kind of stuff.
So you described the story of how you met Malik and sort of how it evolved into some of the work that you're doing with addiction in this community, or these communities that you work in. I have to ask, did you ever fear, or do you fear for your own personal safety? You're a white dude and a white physician coming into this community with privilege, dressed differently than folks and acting differently and speaking differently. And do you now, or have you ever feared for your safety?
So I do, but when I do this and wear black, I look like an FBI agent. So yeah,
I could see that. I could see that.
yeah, I don't wear the blue glasses, but yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so I have feared, but I really look, David, in that ER, you can walk into any room and you can see any potential person with any potential personality, mindset, and you've got to figure out a way real quick to connect. So we learn that as physicians, and that's one of the gifts that we have, because those of us who've seen a lot of patients. So I use my physician skills. So when I'm taking photographs, I'm using like both sides of my brain at the same time, right? Like the arts side and the medical side. So I'm using the gift of what we have learned and the coping skills of what I've learned as a medical provider, healthcare provider, because we all learn these things walking the halls. And that's helped me tremendously. I would have never done this without being a physician. But do I worry about it? Yeah, there's always an extra ear out there. I have a lot of friends and people love me and they like make sure I'm okay. One of the members of the Crips there was arrested recently because somebody was talking about his girlfriend. So boom, there's a big fight. And they were dragged into the precinct house and spent the night in jail. And in the morning, the sergeant comes along, with the big white outfit on, the white hat. And he says, "Hey, what are you doing here? You know the doctor. Get out of here." So when you can do that to people, yeah, they'll kind of leave you alone. But yeah, there's always an outlier. The guns are one thing. The fentanyl, the meth, that's a whole different thing. But when people are drunk, I'm out of here. I just something about when they start drinking.
What is that about? Tell me about
Because
that.
it's interesting. The meth, the meth people and the people doing ketamine, what they're, you can sort of go around the opioid people are real easy. They're just going to go, doop. If they're doing crack with it, because usually they go down up, they try to level themselves out. You can anticipate what they're doing. You look at their eyes, you look at their sweating. But alcohol, they're happy, they're combative, they're mean, they're throwing punches. I'm leaving town. I don't deal with people. I wouldn't go photograph in a bar, but I'll go into a trap house, where the women are performing sex acts, and there's drugs for sale upstairs, and you go up there, and it's $5, $10, and go in and out, in and out, and in and out. And I'll go in there and stir them all up and say, "Come on, let's go get some groceries." And they're like, "What? Let's go." I have a way of getting in there, but I don't mind that stuff. But it's the alcohol bothers me. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the photography and some of the work that you're doing as a medium to get in and explore and document. And as you use the word photojournalism, I had an experience when I had a medium format camera and I would spend
Wow.
time in Central and South America during my early years, donating time to actually medical trips in clinics, and I would bring my camera to
Really?
document what was happening. And I, my audience maybe knows this. I'm a secular Jew, so I don't go to temple anymore. I'm not very religious, but I would say that I've never felt closer to a universal consciousness, God, whatever you call it. When I was behind the camera, I was helping children from a medical standpoint, and I was documenting it with a camera because something about the camera invited me in and was a medium and a way to get into the lives of the children that I was working with in the Amazon and in rural parts of Guatemala that really stirred me. And I'm wondering how you talked about taking pictures in the streets, but do you feel like the camera for you has been a medium? It's been a way to get into the community that you not normally would not have been able to get into without that medium?
100%. People want to show their soul, and they have souls, and they have fascinating stories. Yesterday, I should show you the picture over here. Was with these women of the fentanyl, and they had this abandoned apartment, and one of them sort of took over the apartment. So they figure out a way to live in these, like become squatters. And I brought in some food, and they said, "We want to get our hair done." These are women who are constantly fighting. We want to dye our hair. I said, "Well, I don't know much about dyeing hair, but let's go take a walk." So we went to a few different beauty salons. I had to get the right shade colors. I was like, "Wow, this is interesting." So we finally went in there, and I didn't let them steal anything. So when we went back to the apartment, there's three women who are addicted to drugs, who are in very bad shape, who have very bad backstories, lots and lots of trauma. That's how they got here in a really disgusting, dirty apartment. They look, their hygiene was very, very poor. And it's the whole situation, smelly and messy and hard. And they were meticulously fixing their hair, taking care of each other, dyeing their hair, making sure each one looked great. Like someone has to do the hair. So they nurture each other at the same time. They save each other. They nurture each other, but then they almost kill each other at the same. It's fascinating to watch. So I've got some amazing photographs. I'll send you one later on of the three of them together, just going at it. And one girl had fallen on the train tracks the night before, and her hand was all bandaged up, and she's doing the hair. So you get to see these moments with the camera that you would not normally see, and you get to really lock in and just appreciate. I wouldn't have noticed the nurturing unless I had that camera. So it's very complex, and it's a lot more ambivalence to the whole situation.
So I want to get back to the tragedy that happened around your house and talk about that
Sure,
just for a little bit, because
sure.
it seems like from reading the article that something changed after that event occurred, and inside you, inside your spirit, inside your soul, and you did something about it. You actually went to Congress with a team and passed federal legislation around mandating rear view cameras, and I'm curious how when a tragedy like that happens, we can sometimes go inward. You had talked about folks do substances and alcohol, etc.
Right.
You turned outward in some way, and you actually decided you were going to advocate and take action. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you harness the energy of a tragic event and then moved it into pure advocacy?
So when you're in these situations, you really have to make a decision. Now, David, if I wasn't a physician, there's a good chance, having gone through that experience, that I would have ended up homeless or a substance abuser. There's no question about that.
Why? Why do you say that?
Because the pain was so incredibly, to kill your own child is just something that just blows your mind away. It was an incredible support group that I had in the family, and all the things that I learned being a physician, watching people cope, and having a father who liberated Dachau, who was a number two tanker. And I remember trying to listen to some of those stories, and he didn't want to tell the stories. We actually have the books, and we have the Nazi daggers from the SS. And I said, man, if he could do that at 19, I can do this. So I was very fortunate at the time to be able to work with some people who were in the advocacy group in Washington, D.C., and they said, listen, we really need a spokesperson. You would be the perfect person. You're a pediatrician. You're, white, middle class. If it happens to you, it could happen to anybody. I said, yeah, I'll just do it. And it was an incredible amount of work. Hillary Clinton was involved. Eventually, Obama got involved. We had to sue him, his administration, because he, was being pushed by the automobile industry. It was a lot of testifying in front of Congress. I had to do a lot of press conferences, and all while I'm like seeing I was getting beeped overhead in the Senate building. My kid has this wrong. So I couldn't believe I did this, but this is what we do as physicians, and you learn to stand and deliver. And I always knew that if my father could do that, I can do this, and that I was going to do this for children in the country. It was a very unique opportunity. I said, this is horrible, and I had PTSD. And I don't know if you ever had PTSD. I hope you didn't, but PTSD is really hard to live with, and I just have to do it. I have to be able to take this opportunity and run with it. This is a very unusual baton. I saw it as an opportunity to do something good, and man, it was hard. It was a lot of trauma.
Hmm.
But saved me the patience.
Did you have or do you have a religious background that you could turn to church or some spiritual sense? Did that help you in a shape or form? You talked about your family and the structure of your family that supported you.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Did religion or not play a role in that?
I kind of feel like Dr. Shapiro, who spoke to you a few podcasts ago. I grew up that way, but I don't really have, I also photograph religion, and it's kind of like, I don't know. I didn't really turn to that. I turned to my patients. I turned to medicine. I turned to, I guess my religion is just my stethoscope. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say that, but it's really just dealing with the patients. It's caring for the people that is like my thing. I'd rather just spend Sundays doing that. I did grow up in a Roman Catholic background, but I don't know. My children are Jewish. My wife and I are mixed, fortunately, and my children are Jewish. We had a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah, and yeah, I'm proud of those. But I don't really, I don't know. It's not a big thing. Religion's not a big thing. I didn't turn to that. Turn to the patients, and I turned to the camera.
So, but so just to summarize, and I get the trajectory correct. The event happened. There were 5 or 6 years where you worked on the legislation that got passed, and congratulations on that. That's huge. And then you turned to photography, and then photography sort of led you into Malik's world. Is that a fair assessment of the trajectory? Where's it going to go from here? What are your plans? Like, it's because we think about outcomes and we think about process. And I get a sense, for example, this whole podcast, the reason why you're here today is because I said, I want to get out there, and I think there are people who have stories to tell in the world that we live in. And I want to be there, and I want to witness it, and I want to get it out there. And now we have
Yeah.
27,000 subscribers on
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
YouTube, and it's kind of blowing up or whatever. And it's really been a fascinating journey. And I think about Humemed more around a process because I don't have an outcome. And I'm curious, when you think about where you're at now, are you thinking about outcomes, or are you just living in the moment and thinking about the process of enjoying the work and know that you're being a servant on some level?
So I build the relationships, and I just see where the relationships go. And I had once or twice I've had a goal. I'm going to go down to Appalachia, and I'm going to sort of tell stories that are important. And by the way, completely different direction. I found this woman with these beautiful children, and you sort of go with what you have. And I don't have an exit ramp where it's going to be like, well, it's got to be done by this point in time. I know that I am a physician who tells social documentary stories with groups of people that are the stories usually related to children. They're public health stories, and they're stories of people on the edge. And they're places that you know about, but you're never going to go yourself, but you want to go. You wish you could. So I'm going to go there for you with the camera. I'm going to build these relationships, bond with these people, work over a long period of time, and tell these important stories. And there's a lot, by the way, there's a lot in photography. I had to tell important story correctly with respect and honor, and it's really a big responsibility to tell somebody's story properly, and not put your biases in there as best you can. So, yeah, I mean, generally, I just see where it goes. I don't have a particular next story, but it'll just come along. It'll stay in that track of the margins of society, usually related to the public health of children or youth in America, and places that you want to know about, but you're not going to go yourself.
Yeah.
You're definitely not going where I'm going.
No, I appreciate that. So you've now gone into the homes, and you've been in the environment of families. You're going in and having this very intimate experience. You also have a private practice on Long Island, and where you have an office. Now, 100 years ago, if you and I were pediatricians in New York, we'd be going to homes and actually visiting the homes of families. So I want your thoughts about the juxtaposition of your sense of what you've learned through Malik and others that you photographed, and what we're missing in the office and in the emergency department. Because I have families that have reactions to certain things, and I have my own personal judgments in the setting of the emergency department. And I know that I am completely blind to what their lives are like at home. Absolutely no idea. And so I just want to get a sense of that juxtaposition, because the thing that summarizes so much of what you're doing is you're a servant leader, in my opinion, who sees yourself as a servant and just advocating for so many beautiful things, and have had tremendous success in that realm, including the children that you care for. But on some level, I feel like offices and emergency departments are abstract environments for us to really understand what's happening with the child and the family. So I'm just curious about your thoughts about that. I have a feeling you've thought about this before.
Yeah, so there's a lot of parts of that. First of all, you're sort of jaded to the emergency room. I wish I could take you away for 30 years and walk you back in there, because when I go to the emergency room, I'm just, I'm sick. I'm like, you're not seeing me. When you go to if I go to the emergency room tonight, you're not going to meet me. You're going to meet some other form of me, because I'm going to be petrified. But you walk in there, you're just thinking, you want some cookies and milk, and let's go to work. So it's you're not seeing the real person. Yes, it's true. When you go to their house, you're seeing the real person. Look, because of where I'm located, it's just because of it's not because of me. I happen to have quite a few billionaires, a big chunk of America in the middle, and about 30% Medicaid, which is great. I love the mix.
That's Oyster Bay.
Yeah, that's Oyster Bay.
Which is interesting, because I came from the South Shore of Long Island, and I always thought Oyster Bay were billionaires, Great Gatsby, and the whole thing up there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few celebrities, I can't mention their names, I don't think it's right, but, and I make house calls to them, I do. I don't have I'll see 80 to 110 kids a day, so I don't have a lot of time for house calls, but I'll sneak them in, and, they're all the same. The problems are just different. They really are. I mean, some people, it just you can imagine, right? But I think that I think I think you have too much money, it's a problem. It's a real problem.
I agree. Actually, I agree.
They have the biggest problems. I tell my wife, look, just get enough, and that's enough. It just makes more problems. But when you go into these apartments and you listen, you smell, and you talk, and you feed, and you go to the grocery store with them, it's a completely different story. Completely different story. And it's important. I wish residents had a chance to go out and really just make a few house calls with the community they're taking care of, no matter who it is, whether they're in Appalachia or middle class America. We always forget up at the middle. You'd be surprised. So, yeah, it's a very, very valuable tool. People are fascinating and they're beautiful, and we need more compassion. We are having a compassion crisis, and I don't have to talk about that. We would all agree. We are having a huge compassion crisis right now in this country, and it's affecting people long term, little kids. So who's going to have to rise to the occasion? Us. It's going to be us. It's going to be the physicians who are going to have to do this, along with other people too, because there's a lot of wonderful people in this country. But we have to stand tall and stand and deliver. That's how it is.
Getting back to what I have one more question. Getting back to what we were talking about before, what are you going to be doing in 5 years, and what are you going to be doing in 10 years?
Well, I'm not going to be doing anything different because I love what I'm doing. I mean, it's hard. I don't take too many weekends off. I told my week
Hmm.
this weekend it was off with my wife, and I was like fixing wallpaper and taking to her mother's house for lunch and all this kind of stuff. I said, "This is fun. I just want to go to work."
What do you
Is
think about what do you think about in the morning at 4:30? I read in the article, and we talked about this. You run, and you even run in the snow with frigid
Yeah,
weathers at
yeah.
Arctic temperatures. What um
I think about
what?
my patients. I think about yeah. I mean, I
Hmm.
have chilblains on all my toes now, which is just terrible. I've never had it before, but this weather's terrible. So my toes are all chilblained out.
Hmm.
Pernio. But I think about just life. I think about patience. It's the only time it's really quiet. So yeah, it's just me and the deer and a lot of owls, and I do about 30 to 40 miles a week. I'll do the marathon again this year. My goal is to be the number one fundraiser for Team for Kids, which is a New York City Roadrunners Club. They raise money to teach children in the inner city communities to run instead of getting into gangs. So I'll you know pull that one out of a hat. And yeah, I mean, I just think about life.
Well, um, as I said before, Humemed has been about the journey for me, and we didn't know each other. You sent me a book. You sent me the article. Initially, I thought, "Is this guy legit? Like, what is really going on here?" Because we had a snowstorm, and then you said you were sending me a book, and it never came, and then it came late, and then the book
Yeah.
was beautiful, and then I read the article, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is incredible." And one of the things that I really appreciated about you is you really put yourself out there. I mean, on so many different levels, and you're trying to do the right thing. And I think that we go into medicine thinking about that, and some of us lose our way for whatever reason. But you seem to have stayed true to the reasons why we've taken an oath to take care of others. And I'm frankly honored to have you on the show and hear about your story.
Well, I'm honored to be on the show, and I'll just say that you learn. I think sometimes we don't give our parents enough credit. You probably have two very interesting parents, and
I do.
a lot of what we do is really because that's what they taught us to do. And I have a little bit of a dopamine drip side to me where I really feel very inadequate with the accident. I mean, I killed my son. So the question is, am I good enough to take care of children? Right. But yet I do it for a living. So when things go well, that's my dopamine drip, like I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. But that's not the sole reason I do it. I do it for a lot of reasons, but there's definitely that's a component of it too. You try to, you know, validate your existence. And, the Cameron Gulbransen Kids Transportation Safety Act, which puts the cameras in all the vehicles in this country, that was an accomplishment. It was a great thing to do. I feel very good about that, but it doesn't hold things over and say done. I'll be doing this until the day I die, taking care of people. But I enjoy doing it. I don't, I, what am I supposed to do? Stay home?
It's funny that you say that because I turned 60 this year and I thought, am I going to retire? When am I going to retire? Financially could
Yeah.
retire soon. And
Right.
I have no interest in retiring because if I'm able to walk into an emergency department and take care of 20 kids who are sick and dealing with crazy things and teach the next generation of learners and feel
Yeah.
good about what I do
Yeah.
and make a difference every day I show up to work. Why would I want to retire? I just don't. But I'm not. This isn't against anyone who is going to
Right.
retire. It's fine.
Right.
It's just
Right.
certain
Right.
people are wired different ways, and I think you and I are wired very similarly in that respect.
Yeah, I don't criticize anybody for retiring. I have complete respect
Yeah.
for burnout's a
Yeah.
real thing. It's totally fine. But for those of us who don't, think about what we're worth. We're this collective intellectual entity, and we have so much just to offer people, doctors that are learning in the future, patients. You walk into a room, I've seen over 370,000 patients because I add them up. And, that's pretty cool when you walk in the exam room. You're like, yeah, I've seen this. Yep. And there's just something about it. And the patients get that sense. And I don't want to give it up. It was a struggle to get here. I'm not giving it up. I'm going to keep going.
Well, I'm going to be on Long Island in December. My classmate from high school is a choir director out on Eastern Long Island, and he's his own incredible story, and he is conducting his last winter concert. And so I would love to get together.
Sure, we'll
I
definitely
would
get
love
together.
to get together and have
Yeah.
dinner and
We'll have fun.
meet your wife and talk some more because we're total kindred spirits. And I'm so glad that you decided to give some of your precious time to my audience today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'll tell you have really wonderful people on on this podcast. I really enjoy listening to them.
And you're one of them, my friend. So
well, thank you so much.
All right. So those of you who are listening, please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We want to continue to drive our subscriber rate, but also just spread the word. We have some very, very interesting guests coming up as well. So please stay tuned. We publish every week, and I hope you all have a great day. Greg, thanks for joining.
Thanks for listening to Humemed with David Spiro, MD. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast platform. The video versions are also available on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell there so that you never miss a future episode.